Hi, my name's Nicola, and I'm one of the co-founding directors of an organisation called Flourish Together. We're a pay-it-forward consultancy supporting social entrepreneurs, and we have a network of women change makers that we support, and we reinvest our profits in supporting women to create the change they see needed in communities. I am going to be leading a session today, which is all about trying to unlock the key, find the key to achieving bid writing success. In the current climate with COVID-19 here, we've been supported through Manchester City Council to put together a series of webinars that complements the toolkit that I'm going to be walking people through. But we thought, a toolkit's all well and good, but how do you actually give yourself the best chance of success in applying for funds and thinking beyond funding as well? So what I would say is there is no such thing as the perfect bid. Achieving bid writing success, it is hit and miss. Even the best bid writers in the world, even organisations that have been running, 5, 10, 20 years, don't win every bid that they go for. So it's just putting a bit of a caveat and a reality check on that first and foremost. So who am I and why should you listen to what I'm saying today? So as I've said, I'm Nicola. I have over 20 years experience in this kind of social enterprise world, the voluntary community sector. I've got experience working in funding and making decisions on funding at a kind of local, regional and national level through my roles over the years. I've supported over 2,500 people to develop social and ethical businesses and voluntary and community sector organisations. And I would say over the years, when I kind of analyse the people I've supported and where they're at now, over a third, somewhere in the region of 30 to 40% are sustainable after 3 years, which is a pretty high rate and higher than your mainstream business routes. Whether that's down to me, I don't know, who knows, but certainly there's something within this sector actually where social ventures are resilient creatures. So I'm very passionate about setting them up and helping people to establish them and run them well. I've actually got 10 years experience running my own social enterprises and supporting, leading, managing and running these organisations directly, as well as supporting others. And something that complements this is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a form of fundraising or raising different sorts of resources. And I've run 4 successful crowdfunding campaigns now. And I've actually supported 11 other organisations to crowdfund. And over the last few years, those 11 organisations have secured in the region of about £200,000 across the different, large and small scale funds that they've run and the campaigns they've run. I'd say in the last 9 months alone, when I've been supporting different organisations, I've worked with about 10 intensively, and I've helped them develop bids to secure over £350,000 from a range of sources: lottery, funds, trusts, national funds, local funds, social investment. So hopefully I've got some sense of what to do, or at least give things their best shot. I've had my bids rejected, I've had them be successful, and I don't rely on grant funding. We're going to talk about that today, but we're also going to just highlight that that's not the only route to being resilient in the current climate. And as I alluded to before, within the roles that I've had within funding, I've made decisions on all sorts of grant funding programmes, from the £100 million endowment that Unlimited has, that I used to work for and still do some associate work for. Made decisions on this sort of £8 million partnership programme in partnership with Hefke a number of years ago. Make decisions on our own itty bitty, £500 scatter cash grants that we have through our super events, and anything from sort of 5,000 to 50k within programs that I've been part of running. So I suppose what I'm saying is I've got the knowledge as a funder, sitting on the funding, judging, application, viewing panel, as well as from the coalface, applying for these things and looking at how to create innovation and run programs and complement the growth of social enterprises. And I'm not perfect. I some of the things I'm going to tell you to do. I don't always do, and I think you have to sort of recognise we're all only human, giving this our best shot. So that's me. So on to what we're here to talk about. Yes, we're going to talk about funding today, but I just wanted to highlight the cocktail. I run a session, called Shaking Up Your Income Generation Cocktail, and there's a listen again version of that for anybody that wants to listen. But there are various routes to raising resources and becoming a sustainable venture, and these are just some of the different routes to doing that. Whilst we're going to focus on the orange box a bit today, this funding box, I just want to flag up everything else because, as I keep saying, you can't rely on grants, and grants don't make you sustainable. And in the social enterprise world, where we've been trying to support people to do all of these other things, whilst we might be taking a slight back step currently with a lot of the grant funding that's available and the options that we have to consider to become resilient to survive the pandemic and to support those groups in most need, we mustn't forget the other areas. So clearly trading is selling products and services ultimately to a broad range of customers, and that's money that's you earn through those sales. It's taxable, and the benefit of trading is you get to choose how you spend that income, unlike some of the other options we've got here. Commissioning isn't just selling what you like to the great British public. You are selling to a commissioner with some specific outcomes and outputs and priorities that they're trying to work towards through meeting social needs. There might be in health, there might be in education, there might be commissioned work for specific organisations, but usually you're meeting whoever's commissioning that work, that you're meeting at some sort of tender brief or putting a proposal together to deliver a piece of work for somebody. There's usually a predetermined budget, and you can't just spend this stuff on what you like. Often commissioning won't fund core costs, won't fund your overheads. It'll often be paying specifically for your time or materials or anything it takes to cover whatever's being commissioned, and they'll expect that your overheads and your core business is covered and that they're not propping that up. Fundraising, I will go into a little bit more in a moment, but ultimately that's usually donations of some sort. It's the no strings attached or less strings attached way of getting resources in. It might be cash, it might be resources, it might be pro bono services, but it's raising resources to help you do and complement what you need to run. It's usually non-taxable, it's usually donations based, and if you're a charity, sometimes depending on the type of fundraising you're doing, you can get gift aid attached on that, particularly through certain crowdfund platforms if you're a charity, particularly through certain campaigns that you might run and take donations. But most social enterprises aren't charities or aren't sitting in that world. They've set up for a specific purpose to be a social enterprise, and they're not gift aidable. And ultimately with fundraising, unlike grants, you've got more flexibility on what you choose to spend that money on. You've raised your money, you've raised your donations, you've raised resources, and you use that as you see fit. I'm coming on to funding in a minute, but social finance and investment is a kind of step, usually it's a step beyond funding. So lots of social enterprises won't necessarily be in the camp where they're ready, able, or want to take a risk to take on social finance and investment. This is usually loans or equity in your business. Sometimes there's a blended sort of loan cash mix. Sometimes there's a blended mix of all of these things. Unlike grants, there's a payback period, and there's terms around that. Usually there's a predetermined budget. Whatever your investment you apply for is specific, and the money is to be spent in accordance with what you've said. Sometimes there's some flexibility, if the loan will cover all manner of things, you've got some flex there, but there is additional reporting and additional due diligence, additional paperwork to prepare, and additional ways to mitigate circumstances and take the risk out of any investor investing in you. On to funding. So funding what I would say is, and I keep saying, you can't rely on funding to really grow and sustain what you're doing on a long term. I would suggest funding is great for startup, good for innovation opportunities, good for research and development. It's good for working with targeted groups, clearly groups of multiple disadvantage. That's what most of these grants are set up for, is to help those people in most need. And there are some funds out there that help cover core funding or core costs over a period of time, once you've demonstrated your track record in being able to operate in a way that that funder is happy to take that risk. They're usually non-taxable. It's usually a donation of a sort. There will be tax at the point of spend, so you'll be paying tax out on what you buy. You'll be paying tax on national insurances and salaries and things like that, or any freelancers or associates working for you. But it sits in the world of funding as opposed to taxable products and services, and usually there's a predetermined budget, so you can't just spend these things as you like. Most funders will have things they will and won't fund, and again, unlike just spending this money in any which way you want and having the freedom to choose what you do, there is additional reporting on these, depending on the amount of money, the type of funder that you're working with, and what it is you're doing. So that, in a nutshell, is the kind of set of routes to resource. And you really have to think about what your short and long-term priorities are and who your partners, stakeholders and customers are, and it will guide you as to which boxes you need to be aiming at. But I would say you probably need to be juggling balls across them all, where possible, or at least have sight of all of these options, and not just rely on grants, which I keep saying, which we're going to talk about. So before we get onto the toolkit and the grants, just highlighting, there are many diverse ways of fundraising, and I would say these are more unrestricted. You get, it's not exactly free money. You have to work for this stuff. You have to build relationships. You have to deliver results because you're wanting to use whatever these resources are to grow what you're doing. But there's less strings attached usually than with grants. So I just flag up, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of these. Most of these are fairly self-explanatory, but whether you're doing online fundraising like crowdfunding, selling online tickets or whatever, e-fundraising through social media and other platforms, whether you're developing relationships for kind of sponsorship, CSR with local businesses or anyone else, whether you're creating membership fees, subs or donations and pay as you feel sort of donations, or whether you're looking into the realms of community share issues and social impact bonds. There's wider ranges of fundraising than people immediately think of, and do explore some of those options in addition to grant funding alone. So the meat in the sandwich is this toolkit that we've recently created. We've basically put together over 100 links to funds, support and opportunities that can try and help people navigate through what's happening and what's available and where support lies at the moment. So I'm going to whiz through the toolkit, but ultimately it comes into the sections I've listed here. We're going to talk a bit about the government support, local councils, we've got to sort of link into that. There's quite a bit of COVID response funding around at the moment. There's some quite specific remits, and some of the traditional funders who you're used to working with have kind of battened down the hatches or had a rethink or have repurposed some of their funds to come up with COVID specific programs at the moment. There's still a broad range of funders out there who are funding as usual. They might be overwhelmed or they might have different timescales right now, but they're still there and open for business. And we've also put in this, because it's a toolkit, some wider opportunities to consider. So I'm just going to stop sharing this for a second and come in to share the toolkit itself and just walk through a little bit of that. So here we have the toolkit. It's a PDF. It's on our website in our knowledge hub. So www.flourishtogether.org.uk, and if you click on our knowledge hub, you will see the latest blog, or one of the latest blogs is this, or you can search for it. So it's a lovely 22, we whittled down to 22 pages, but we hope that a good chunk of this will be suitable for helping you think things through at the moment. There's some stats and information on the lay of the land right now that talks about, the context and what's going on. It gives some stats around need right now that we looked into. There's a whole range of support that the government is offering right now, and I was just going to go over that so that people don't forget what's there, and make sure that they don't dismiss it. There's some grants about. There's support for freelancers if you've been freelancing for more than 3 years, and then there's discretionary grants in addition to the standard stuff that the government have put out, and there's also a range of loans for those of you that have been running for some time and have various people in jobs. You'll have come across the furlough scheme. That's changing currently, and for those of you that have got buildings and are paying rate relief, or paying business rates, there is rate relief. And there is some good practice whereby people are suggesting public contracts need to be paid up into certain, there's certain guidelines to ensure that public sector contracts are being paid and not being paused. So that's what the first few pages of this booklet are about. And there's other things here to do with sick pay and tax support, and VAT deferral, protection from eviction, with just some general tips really on all of the government support that's out there. I will say some of this is ending, some of this is changing, so you have to keep abreast of all of that, but don't dismiss some of the standard stuff that's out there and think, oh, it won't relate to social enterprise, because this section here tells you how it all does. What I will just quickly go back to here is that wherever you're based, whether it's Greater Manchester, which all of these link to, or not, your local council is overseeing things like the business rate relief. They're overseeing things like the small business discretionary grants, and so you are best to check in with them on what's currently available to you, and usually it just means putting some basic information into their site, and they will tell you whether or not you're eligible for what's on offer. Likewise, if you're freelancer, there is just about, there's still time to check whether your UTR number, the length of time you've been trading in your accounts history, means that you're eligible for a grant, the self-employed income support scheme. So it's just worth looking at. I know there's a lot of people that aren't, fall through the cracks, or you've just not been set up long enough, or you've not got the length of accounts that are deemed to make you eligible for these things, but we're just flagging it up in case anybody's forgotten or not looked at those routes. So next section in here just talks about some specific Manchester related grants around COVID. So some of the main ones about at the moment are Forever Manchester grants. They've got this up to £5,000 grant that they're making decisions on a rolling basis, and it's got quite a quick turnaround time, and we know quite a lot of people who've been successful with those. If you aren't in Manchester, the wider community foundations link there will take you to your local community foundation. There's also the We Love Manchester Fund. That's got different kinds of grants. There's an individual, a small grant and a large grant, and it's worth checking there for their criteria and whether what you're running is suitable for pitching to that. I was talking about local councils before. The local councils all have neighbourhood investment funds. These aren't anything new. These roll and roll. but they are targeted around COVID response stuff at the moment, and it's worth checking with your neighbourhood investment fund through these details to see whether that's been spent, or whether you could pitch for a slice of that to deliver what you're doing locally, providing it meets with their priority needs. You've got some small wellbeing grants. Currently, these are helping people, get out and about, improve their health and well-being, improve mental health. There's some small grants, and then there'll be some larger grants. So some of these schemes are kind of trialing £500 scatter cash type money, with a view to then seeing what comes forward and then investing larger sums in those projects that work, or those projects that need more investment and that are growing. So the GM Wellbeing Grants is something to consider. Most social enterprises have a health and wellbeing link, or a lot of them do, well over 40-50% and upwards do. So just have a think about how you might angle what you do to align with some of that. And also around that sort of moving and health and wellbeing, there's these Greater Manchester Moving small grants, and again that they're going to grow into some larger grants. So options there. The Prince's Trust are partnering. There's a few schemes that they've got on at the moment, but they're partnering with different partners. There's one with the GMCA, and there's one with I think it's Barclays. It's further down the toolkit. And this is in the Greater Manchester version because it's happening now, and there's a call out, and they're helping people learn what this is going to be for. Applications aren't quite live yet, but they are putting out on information events. So if you're working with young people, or you are a young person, by that, then here they're saying up to the age of 25, then do look that up and see if there's an opportunity there for you. I'm not going to go into all of these, because a lot of these some of you may have come across and may have applied to before, but it's just a refresh to let you know that some of these funds here, so the lottery as an example I will look at shortly, and various others, do have COVID response initiatives. It's NatWest, not Barclays. So the Prince's Trust with NatWest, the Heritage Fund, so the lottery's Heritage Funds have a COVID response. You've got Barclays have got their own Standard Life. There's all sorts. And I'd say have a rummage through. We've tried to put in there some key information, what these things are for, how you can go about applying, and how pressing this is in terms of deadline, so that you can quickly flick through and see what's relevant. And most of these are live now, or they're coming online soon. We've got a whole bundle there, so have a good look. There's then the next section leads into all sorts of other stuff. So different funders that you may or may not have come across that aren't necessarily putting a COVID sort of lens over what they're doing right now. And you can have a good look through all of these. Most of these are live or have been live recently. And as it says, have a look through those, see what's happening with them, and see what could be relevant for you. In there, it does link to the crowdfunder, Back Her Business. This crowdfunder, there's lots of, there's crowdfunder, there's Kickstarter, Space Hive, Just Giving. There's a whole range of sites there. And whilst they're mainly, fundraising platforms, some of them do have match-funded grants attached for certain themes or certain geographies. And it may well be that you can make your fundraising money go further by running a small crowdfund or a large crowdfund through those. And we would say that's not for the faint-hearted. It's not to be rushed or taken lightly. And we will be running crowdfunding training sessions before the summer to help people get their heads around things to bear in mind before you launch a crowdfund. What have we got next? So there's all sorts in here. There's a mix, everything from People's Postcode Lottery to planting trees. There's all sorts. And there has just been, it's just come to an end actually, the Resourcing Social Justice Fund that came out. They are going to be doing more call outs as time goes on. They've put their first call out, which came to an end just recently, but we're interested to see who gets back through that initiative, and then they're going to further develop that over the coming years, as far as I can see. So whistle stop tore through the toolkit there in terms of funds, we've also put in here, and this is the extra bit, funds are all well and good, but it's the support that makes all the difference. So there's a whole list of different resource hubs for specific needs. Manchester, Greater Manchester has the Business Growth Hub, which provide all sorts of business support, and they do have some specialised social enterprise support, and health and wellbeing support or retail support, so they can cross sectors, and there's access to telephone support where you can contact people and have a chat with a business advisor. There's also a whole range of other options here. The Good Finance Hub, they've basically collected a whole set of resources, a bit like this, but it's an evolving, updated resource there for people to look at what might be suitable and helpful. There's arts support, there's community business support, there's the Plunkett Foundation that do more support in rural areas and community businesses. Power to change. So have a good look at that. I'm going to sneeze. I apologise. Oh, hay fever. I did this on the last thing that I recorded. Anyway, we also wanted to put in here about attracting media attention. We've got some really good agencies around Manchester that help people get their messaging right, get their communications right, and sometimes having good media presence, be that social media, getting in the press. Just like Open Kitchen Manchester have done here, who are a case study. There's a number of case studies throughout this toolkit. Getting media attention is a great way of promoting yourself, getting the story out there, promoting the support that you have on offer, or raising the awareness of wider funders, investors, or for other fundraising purposes. So there's a little section on that, and various tools and links to people like the Media Trust as well. Other support agencies, I'm not going to go through all of these, it's just highlighting that there's a lot of support about, so you don't have to do this on your own. Yes, Flourish are here, and we can support those people in our network and people who are current clients. And we do have some pro bono time over the summer to be able to support people develop their bids and their ideas, and a whole range of webinars coming up. But do use your localised support, be they councils for voluntary services, other networks that you have on your doorstep, which we've put a number of them on here, and see what's happening for you locally and what else is going on. We wrote a toolkit the other year in partnership with Manchester BME Network and GMCVO, and we put a whole range of culturally supportive organisations and consultants in there, so that people who are wanting some more sort of specialist insight, specialist expertise, or want support where they know that the directors and senior leadership teams have got people from BAME communities on those boards, then there's a list there, and a whole range of other networks too. Social investment isn't something we're talking about much. I touched on it earlier on, and we have put links to all of the, some of the key social investment agencies there. It may be that in the current climate, you're not sure if loan investment is the right thing for you. It either will or it won't be, and you can look into this through these agencies and through the support that's available there. In addition to this toolkit, there's a bunch of other useful toolkits that we thought people might want to know about. So there's a whole list of them there, anything from social investment stuff to community business stuff, to getting access to special advice and information, and there's a Claire's Community Wealth Builders Toolkit that has some really interesting stuff in, so use that at your leisure. We just were flagging up as well that housing associations are a good port of call, so don't forget about those. They offer support quite often. They do understand social enterprises, certainly the list here does, and they've often got community investment funds or tenants and residents funds, and ways that they're trying to make a difference in their locality. We've added in a whole bunch of thematic support. I won't go through all those, but it just gives you some links to click through some specific support if you're working in specific areas, and to complement what we do, running your business your social enterprise takes all sorts of skills. Yes, it takes enterprise skills, it takes management skills, but it also takes leadership skills. And so we've put a whole list of what we feel are good leadership development programs that could potentially help your skills, give you headspace to think, and build your resilience through the pandemic and into the future. And then last but not least, there's a whole bundle of different kinds of awards. We know lots of you are doing amazing things. Don't let that go unnoticed. Do make nominations, nominate one another for any number of these awards and others that are out there that can help raise your profile, helps bring recognition, and help you sort of build networks and connections in other areas. So that's our whistle-stop tour of the toolkit. I'm just going to bring back the presentation here and just pick up, because that was quite quick going through a lot of that. So I have got a bit of a checklist. I think I'm just going to run through. So some things, if you missed that, do check, are you eligible for the self-employed income support scheme? If you've got freelancers and associates that work for you, they might be. If you are working in that world, don't dismiss that, because it's up to £7,500 grant, and they work out a proportion, and all you have to do is put in your UTR number, and it's 80% of I think it's 3 months takings, or turnover through your accounts. They'll check all of that out, and it will just land in your account if you're eligible. A recap on the fact that local councils have support and funds available. Yes, some of them are linked to the government schemes, but they've also got these local discretionary business grants, so do look into those in your local area. COVID response funding, clearly there's all sorts out there. We were sort of highlighting a bundle there, Awards for All for the Manchester GMCVO, Salford CVS, some of the ones that you should be looking at if you haven't done already. I mentioned already, watch out for housing associations, see what they're doing. Some of them kind of took some time to do some research, ask some questions, and pause on their community investment funds, but a lot of them will be ramping those back up now if they aren't already. There's general funding there, as we've seen, and there were all sorts of wider opportunities. What wasn't mentioned in the toolkit there, but is an opportunity that's available in the Northwest, and especially around Greater Manchester, Lancashire, and certain other areas, are the WEA European funding grants at the moment that are for training and employability programs. And we've had one of those to run our Time to Grow program, and we've supported numerous other people to apply for those. It's £20,000, so it's a healthy amount of money to deliver programs and support. So whether you're already working with people who are currently classed as unemployed, or whether you could target your work to help people who are, especially given the current climate that the unemployment rate's going to rocket, it may be that you want to look at that. And they're a great team to work with. We've been pleasantly surprised. I would say if you haven't been running for more than 2 or 3 years, you've not got a way of sorting your admin processes out, and you haven't got an accountant, and you haven't got a way of monitoring and evaluating larger programs, I wouldn't go for that, because there is quite a lot to do. But if you're up for cutting your teeth on this and stepping up, and you've got some good programs, and you're more than a one-man band, then it's worth having a look at that. Different investment options, we talked through some there. Check those out if you're thinking of social investment. And certainly in Greater Manchester, GMCVO have a social investment fund that they are still running, and they're still open for applications. Gary Miller and Tekla there, I'd be only too happy to hear from you if you want to think things through. And you can apply for this thing called a REACH grant, or basically a feasibility grant, to see whether or not social investment is something that's suitable for you. So you don't have to just jump straight in. There is a kind of blended mix there. And we've got Resonance based in Manchester, and various other, the Key Fund work across the area. So do have a look at some of those things. I've talked a bit about crowdfunding. I'm not going to labour over too much more of that, but what I was going to talk about is, shortly, is evidencing your impact and how you go about strengthening these bids, and thinking about, if you can't go for these bids just yet, who could you partner with? And are there consortium approaches where a larger organisation or somebody a bit more established would work in partnership with you so that you can act as a delivery partner in a bigger bid? And I'm sure lots of you have got experience of that. But when you start looking at the eligibility criteria of these funds, just thinking, who's the partner that's got the best chance of success here? Is it me? Is it you? And think about what trusted relationships you've got with people around you to create complementary approaches for some of this stuff. I did just put in this grey box here, if you are new to funding, or even if you're not, I've put kind of what I call a quick win trajectory. What does that mean? But it's where do where are you trying to get to, and where do you start with this stuff? And more often than not, if you're an individual who at the early stages of what you're doing, those in pink, people like Unlimited, the School for Social Entrepreneurs, and doing your own independent fundraising is a way to get started and raising some cash to be able to test, trial, and develop what it is you're doing. There's then kind of in this green box a progression route to other stuff. So beyond the initial couple of £1,000 mark, and looking at more like 500 to 5,000, 10 to 20,000. It tends to be in the green box there, where housing associations, CVSs, the Lotteries Awards for All are all places that once you've got governance in place, so you've set yourself up as an unincorporated association with a constitution, or you've set yourself up as some form of non-profit company or charitable organisation, you can then start to look at those things. And then beyond that, the blue stuff starts to get into the 20 to 50,000 pounds and upwards money, where the lotteries, various thematic options are out there. The likes of Esme Fairbairn, Joseph Rowntree, comic relief, larger comic relief money, larger children in need money, larger lottery money, are all options as you start to develop a track record. Once you've been going 3 years plus, you've got turnover of more than 30 to 50,000. Some grants and some projects, or proposals out there, they won't fund you unless you've got £500,000 turnover and upwards. So it's horses for courses, and in those cases where the lead partner has to have £500,000 or significant turnover to demonstrate they've got the structure in place to manage the fund and to deal with the programme and any challenges and mitigate any risks. It usually tends to be a consortium bid that you have to put together. So being open to that and thinking about who you could approach to try and do that is going to be something to think about. So it's just a quick how not to write a funding bid. I hope I've still got you with me here. I'll be wrapping up soon. So how not to. We've got so if you were going to write the worst funding bid in the world, here's some tips. Go in blind. Don't read the materials, don't read the criteria, don't get a full understanding of what they're after. So many times we'll just rush. I've got down here, cut and paste, just cut and paste away into another bid and sling it in and hope for the best. That's not how you get the awards or the funding usually. You have to really read through what it is their priorities are. They're not pretending when they say, you've got to be of a certain size, or you've got to have a certain turnover, or they'll only work with certain key vulnerable groups. And certainly during the current climate, unless you're working on the front line with people who are at most risk of poverty, hardship, ill health, risk of losing, the housing, or, people who are really in need of those charitable funds that are being administered, then don't put the bid in, or work in partnership with somebody else to deliver elements of things, but don't, they're not kidding when they put that criteria out there, and that's what they work with. So when they're scoring this stuff, they really do look at that seriously. For some bids I put in, going cold, just fling in your application and hope for the best. And what I would say is 9 times out of 10, it's much better to try and build a relationship with the organisation, even if it's only for 500 quid or, you know, £5,000. Certainly if you're applying for 20k or more, there's a good chance you need to have talked to them in advance, made a bit of a relationship, talked to their regional manager, the grant provider, the program manager, whatever they're calling themselves, fund manager. You need to bring them up and have a chat with them. Easier said than done, but do try. And whilst we're all on lockdown, it's not so easy, but you need to be out and about schmoozing where these people are. And we can talk again about, you know, how do you schmooze with these people, but don't just throw bids in cold. Go in with the wrong governance and track record. Sort of, I've alluded to that already, but unless, you know, if you're a one-man band, or if you're a sole trader, or if you've not got a clear governance structure, or you've not been going long enough for this particular funder to want to take the risk with what you're doing, hang fire. Get some support and some guidance as to how to get the right governance in place. Are you diverse enough? Are you representative of your community? Does that matter to the funders that you're going to? And if so, just have a look at who's involved in the running of your organisation and whether you're going to get taken seriously by that funder. I put, you know, burn the midnight oil, you know, and that's what this picture's of here with a candle, and I don't know if that's white wine or red wine or who knows, I dread to think. But we've all been there. You know, I'm telling you not to burn the midnight oil. I burn the midnight oil sometimes. I'm getting better at that. I've not stayed up writing a funding bid till 1 a.m. for at least a year or two. And that's not even for clients, you know. Maybe actually there was one. There was one of mine in the last 6 months, but it won. They got it. You know, general rule of thumb is if you're, you know, got matchsticks trying to get this thing in, trying to get this thing done, there's typos, there's errors, it's not making full sense, and you're just bunging stuff in to get to the deadline, and it's not being clearly thought through, and that will come across in the bid. So it's just a word of caution there. Easier said than done when we're spinning a million plates and we're trying to fit bid writing in alongside everything else, because you know, the hellish truth is that, you know, whilst you might get funded to do this, that and the other, whilst your services get paid to deliver, you know, consultancy or programs or whatever it is you do, bid writing and business development is always one of those costs that's it's got to be squeezed in, you know, unless you found ways within your business model to get more of a full cost recovery for your time and get this stuff paid for. It's fiddly. Totally ignore the competition. Now there's a good idea. I think it's well worth looking at who the funders have backed previously. Who are they investing in? And all of their websites show you this stuff. So go and see who they've funded before, and you will know of some of them, and you may or may not agree with the funder's choice as to who they've backed. I've had some heated debates with people, and you know, it's hard, you know, because you're competing against all sorts of organisations, and just don't ignore your competition. Work out who they are and think about how your proposition is going to be more compelling, going to be more efficient, going to be more cost effective, going to be more impactful, and go and figure that out. Do ignore, I just mentioned before, full cost recovery. So, you know, if you aren't going to think through carefully and fully cost out appropriate budgets for what it is you need to deliver, or seek advice from advisors, mentors, other peers and colleagues who have put bids in, you know, to critique this stuff, or to say, don't forget about this, or, oh, you know, what happened to you when you didn't do this? You know, you can easily go bankrupt or go unpaid if you haven't put the right costs in. So do put the costs in. And, you know, funders won't fund everything, and there'll be certain costs they might not fund. And it might be you have to make that decision and say, do you know what? This isn't financially viable for me to run this. They're giving us peanuts and they want diamonds. So not all funders are and fund opportunities are solid and good bets for you to go for. So just be mindful of that. I put ignore, you know, I don't know if anyone's heard of PESTLE reports, I'm going to come on to, but you know, if you want to fail at this, ignore the, you know, political, economic, social, technological, local and environmental context. You know, ignore the local need, ignore what local policy is saying. You might not agree with it, but it's there and the research has been done, and you have to demonstrate that you know your stuff and that you know the specific needs for what's going on. So I put that in there to come back to. Assume that you're unique with the best idea, and the best solution going. Don't forget that, and I've done that, I've had 15 years plus reading funding applications as well as writing them, getting them and not getting them. But these guys sit and read these ideas and these proposals all day long, year after year. So it's highly unlikely that what you're sending them isn't something they've not already seen, read, heard of. From time to time, if you put together a really good sort of pestle context, you've really done your homework to find need or new need, or you've asked the right questions to understand what new innovation you're going to be able to bring, or you've just delivered some amazing work and you've got really good social value data and impact data and reports on that will make a fund to stand up. But just banging in there with what you think is the best idea won't sell it to the funders. There is always these word counts. So I put, go over the word count or write one word answers. I mean, half of you will be sort of nodding there and thinking, it's the right pain when you've got 200 words or however many, 400 words or so many characters, and you're like, you spend half your time fiddling and fettling just to make the thing fit, or taking out spaces between commas, and there's all sorts of crafty things to squeeze it in. But don't go over the word count because they won't read what's gone over the word count. And on the opposite, they don't want an essay half the time, although they might give you every now and again a bit of room to write. They don't want one word answers. You've got to clearly explain and articulate. They're not mind readers. They do need to know what's in your mind and in your plans. So it's getting that balance between not going over and not going under what they're wanting. And what I will say, you can write the best bid in the world, you can do them day after day, you can go in for all sorts of stuff. But if you haven't read the small print and you haven't checked what they want from you in return, yes, they'll want you to deliver your plan, deliver it to the budget that you set out, more or less. But what else? Are they wanting blood? Are they wanting endless reports? Are they wanting you to sign your life away on photo rights? What is it that they want in return, and make sure that you check that out so that it doesn't come back to bite you, and check that whatever their reporting expectations are is something that you can manage. Like I said before, these WEA grants, it's not impossible, but it's a step up from a usual award for all or a limited grant or a CVS grant. There's quite a bit more to report on, and more administration work and form filling for every participant that comes, and just check what it is that you've got to do to demonstrate you're doing it. And make sure that you can manage that. I came across a document, it's this Unlimited blog, Getting Your Ducks in a Row. It's a good little blog, have a little read of it, but it made me think, and add in this slide about things to prepare to respond, yes, during COVID and during these quick fire rounds of money that keep coming out for things, but in general, what do you need a folder of on your computer to make sure that you can just boom, crack on within a day or a week or a month, however long you've got to focus on this. A key document that's got your company number, your address or addresses, your lead applicant information, and some content and information about your directors and trustees. Usually when you're making a bid, there needs to be at least 2 people mentioned, particularly if you're going for, £5,000 to £10,000 and upwards. They'll want who's the main contact and who can we check in with. And so usually it's a manager or the MD or project manager who's putting the bid together, and it might be a trustee or another director or the finance manager who is the other named contact. So just think about getting some information prepared, so it's not just you that has to write these bids. Somebody else can do that bid writing with you or for you. Some simple information, although every bid's different, and that's why you can't cut and paste this stuff. They usually want to know something about your vision and mission. What are your key services, what's your purpose, what are you doing, who's benefiting, and what's the social issues that you're trying to address. and having some clear evidence of demand on that, so that you can articulate that to them. And then some of them want to know who's who, who are your directors, who's the team involved, what's your track record. So having a bit of bump, whether you call it a business plan or whether it's just a document that you've got to use when you're writing bids, have these things together. It's also worth having keeping information on your accounts. So you might not have got this far yet, depending on how long you've been going, but make sure you've got lists of, year 1, year 2, year 3. What are the summary headings for your accounts? And have you got those documents ready to attach if you need to a funding proposal? If you've not got current accounts or up-to-date accounts, or you're a startup and you're still not got your first set of accounts, do make sure you've got like an income and expenditure document, set of management accounts that can at least show what is going on, what income and expenditure you've got, and how you're managing your money. And think about creating documents that help you prepare future projections, because they will be asking that. And if you're trying to go for 2 or 3 years funding and it's like a finger in the air guess, and they can see that, and there's no clear assumptions, and it's none of it makes sense, then they'll know that you've not planned and thought this through. So spending some time where you can looking at what scenarios might look like, and we have got some workshops coming up on this, so look out for those. Clearly having your bank details. So these are all things that are just ready to go when you need to either attach them or put them in a document. Policy documents. So when you start going for funding, I don't know, it might be £5,000 and upwards, it might be £10,000 and upwards, but certain funders, whether it's posting it to them or whether it's, as many do now, going on a funding portal and logging in and having to log in and out, faff about, they want you to attach all this stuff. So there's health and safety policies, equality and diversity policies, volunteer policies, safeguarding policies, GDPR, sustainability policy, and many others. Just depends what they're asking for and what you need. They're pretty standard documents, these, and if you were to Google policies for VCSE organisations, you'd get a bunch of generous CVSs, and Salford CVS is one of them, where there's template documents for all of this stuff, and you just Control F or find and replace, and you just put your name in wherever it's meant to be, your company organisation, and you create your own policies quite quickly and quite simply. Make sure you've got your insurance in place. And I've come across a lot of people where they didn't have the right insurances, or it wasn't at the right threshold for the value of the contract. So most funders will let you up your insurance if you need to after they've made a decision, but just look at what you need to have in order. And then here, these are a bit more of a luxury. If you've got a social value report, and Flourish do create those people, quick plug there, but social value reports and impact data, PESEL reports that I linked to before, links to other policy evidence, so that you can really evidence your need, is important. If you've written bids before, having them all in a folder so that you can reflect quickly on previous bid content and be able to adapt and amend this. Don't cut and paste, as I keep saying, but you can repurpose this stuff, even if it was unsuccessful. Just because it wasn't successful doesn't mean that you didn't write some good stuff or have some good ideas. Competition, capacity, money that's available, and just not being quite the right fit are all sorts of reasons as to why your bid might not get through. But the content that you've written is helpful for future stuff. And I would say, for those of you that already do, and for those of you that haven't started yet, building your online presence. Whilst a lot of funders haven't got the time in the day to start faffing about, looking through endless photographs you might send them of who you are and what you do, or going clicking hyperlinks to this, that and the other, there's no harm in putting this stuff in there, and there's no harm in having an online presence that they can check. Do you exist? What do people say about you? How professional are you coming across? What impact do you look like you're having? Funders will from time to time look at that in conjunction, especially if they've got a difficult decision and they're like, they'll start rummaging then into different organisations to find out a bit more about them if there's gaps, or if they just can't quite make a decision on the application. They might have a look at who you are and what you're saying about yourself, or what others are saying about you. we're coming out of time, I'm sure, but it was just, if you want to be slick with this, you know, one of the things that I've learned over the years, it's all well and good putting your ideas down, putting a good budget together, putting a clear plan over a good time. You know, you can look as efficient as you like in terms of how you think your idea is being put across, but so can everybody else. You know, a lot of other agencies can, and there's lots of other people out there looking for this money. What's really important right now is to really evidence base demand and need, and why what you're doing is clearly current, relevant, and people want it. Local people want it, regional councils and regional priorities want it, and national priorities want it. So this may or may not make sense to you right now, but ultimately, to create a good PESTLE report, or to find the right stats to show that you know your stuff and that you've got everything in place to explain why, beyond any reasonable doubt, there's a clear need for what you're delivering, and your solution addresses this stuff. The NHS, Department for Education, you know, business and enterprise side of the government, DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, they've all got strategy documents, policy frameworks, oodles of content there that they've already gone and researched this thing to death, whatever it is you're doing. And so whether you agree with what they've done and the research methods, or what these things say, there's stats and data out there that helps back up your argument. So if you've not had the luxury of putting together some of your own impact evaluations and your own reviews and social value reports yet, don't panic, because getting desk-based research, which is what this is, can give you a head start on evidencing demand for this stuff. Whether the government have created these reports, academics have created these reports, consultants have been paid to put these reports together to tell us all about it. There's data out there on what you're doing, and I've just highlighted here, you know, this 5-year forward view for mental health is quite a well-known policy document setting out the future strategy for mental health nationally, and then it was reviewed just recently, so you can go and have a look at that. Future in Mind is an alternative version for young people. There's all sorts of documents around education, around the criminal justice system, you name it, there's loads of it. And you know, when you first start your project off, or you start your idea, you have no clue that, you know, you're going to be reading all these boring strategy documents, but actually they're not boring at all. And if you can stick with it and skim read and pull out, you know, where are the stats here, and flick through to the bits that are relevant for your business, there's some amazing information out there that helps tell the story as to what that you might not be able to articulate as to why what you're doing is needed. So have a look at that. There's these joint needs, does it stand for Joint Needs Strategic Assessment? I think that's what it stands for. But every area's got these JNSA documents. It's kind of part council, part health reports and policy documents, where they come up with these frameworks for what needs to be done locally. I have got some examples that I can show, but Google JNSA for your area and see what it tells you. Office for National Statistics have got all sorts around employment levels, around demographics in the area, around housing, around policing and criminal justice. There's all sorts of data and stats out there that can be quite targeted and localized, or by region, or whatever. Mintel reports still exist for anyone that remembers those. I'm not suggesting you start signing up and buying these things, but Central Library in Manchester's got all the Mintel reports. You can go in and have a rummage through those. Often they're on kind of business and market intelligence, so they're more to do with things like retail or the food industry, or health and social care, sector-based market research, where there'll be stats and data and you know, trends that you can look at to back up what it is you're doing. HBR, that's the Harvard Business Review. There'll be all sorts of Harvard Business Review or other academic, you know, journals, papers and information that talks about what you do, and usually the research and the stats in there is fairly reliable. The GMCA, so Greater Manchester Combined Authority, has this strategy that then filters into kind of borough strategies, and it's called Our People, Our Place, and there's all sorts of other strategies under the digital strategy, education strategy, inclusive growth strategy. I'm sorry if I'm boring here, but this is the world the funders are in, that sometimes our social entrepreneurs and our change makers aren't. And until you've joined the threads between what policy and strategy and the goals and the budgets that have been outlined are for, with what your services are able to deliver, you won't knit together the funds and the higher level funds and the contracts and commissions that you'll want to go for further down the line. And then I've just thrown in, there's all sorts of other stuff, all sorts of think tanks and people putting information together. You know, I've put this example of, you know, that bugs me every time I read it, that, you know, less than a penny in every pound that gets spent of venture capital money goes to women-led organisations. You know, and there's a whole big report on that that we review and use the data of when we're demonstrating why we need to be here as Flourish. But Claire's IPPR both produce good research reports with up to the minute data around what's going on in communities, and SE UK has quite a lot of useful reports and state of the sector surveys and things like that, as do the CVSs in Greater Manchester and the 10GM network as well. So I put that out there. I'm sorry if that's boring, but that's the nub of what makes these things stand out. What to do when you get rejected? You know, you might need to go and have a good cry. It depends how desperate you were at the time to try and bring that in, but certainly don't take it personally. The funders, you know, it's not a personal decision when they make these decisions. You know, having been part of various funding teams, they are human beings. Our next podcast is called Show Me the Money, and we're interviewing some funders to see it from their point of view right now. Do seek feedback where you can get it. I know it's very frustrating when a lot of these funders won't give you the time of day to tell you why you weren't successful. It's purely down to capacity and demand, and usually I hate that. I think people should get good feedback, and the lottery, to be fair, if you go for an awards for all, they will tell you exactly why you weren't successful, and you can reapply. You can take that feedback on board and reapply, but not all funders will give that. And so read the rejection letters very carefully, and do ring them up for feedback, and do, you know, email them, and see if somebody will have a chat with you about this, and do reapply. Just because you've been rejected from one particular funder, you have as much chance of getting through next time as you have going cold to another one. Just you know, funders do lose sleep, and they do feel bad when they've had to make these difficult decisions, that this agency got it over this, or this community or this organisation got the investment. You know, they do remember who they rejected, and so go talk to them and see how you would have to re-angle what you put together to be successful next time, and collar them over coffee at these conferences or networking events. I know we're a bit trapped at the minute, but they will talk to you. They are humans, as I say. This point about do reapply, you know, with an improved plan, improved evidence, improved budget, more credible partners, whatever it is that's not helped you get through the first time, strengthen it with the same funder or with others. And there are funders out there who say, oh, you can't reapply for a year, or you can't, you know, so fair enough, don't go back to those. But if you can go back with a better proposal, you know, within a reasonable time frame, do it. And awards for all and the lottery are really good for that. If you can't get feedback from the organisation, get the next best thing and talk to colleagues, peers, trusted contacts. Get them to review and critique a bid and give you feedback. And they might give you better feedback than the funder, you know, depending on what they've done before. As I've said, do rehash and reuse rejected content. Just because it got rejected doesn't mean it wasn't right or it wasn't a good fit. You know, get review, get feedback, and get back in the saddle, I suppose is what I'm saying. As I've mentioned earlier, do develop a wider income generation strategy. You know, going for funding alone is never a sustainable option. And as I always say, repeat custom is far better. You know, it will, repeat custom beats bid writing any day of the week. Usually a funder will fund you once. If you're lucky, they might fund you twice. They might fund you for 2 or 3 years, but when it's up, and you can't go back. So if you've only ever spent your time building relationships with grant funders, you're barking up the wrong tree. You need to be talking to people who can commission your work or who've got grants to invest in new proposals and new work. Councils and I suppose and housing associations, they might call it a grant instead of a contract, but working with them can sometimes be more helpful than some of the one-off funders. And ultimately, looking at what products and services you can sell in addition to what it is you're doing where you've got capacity is always key. And I put here, in addition to trading and commissioning, fundraising is sometimes more fun than bid writing. I don't discuss, you might disagree with me there, but fundraising can build your market, it can create fun and more creative ways of promoting yourself, and there's usually all sorts of surprising benefits and less strings attached, and you can fundraise and get a few £1,000s in a much more fun and engaging way than sitting up all night writing a funding bid. So I just play devil's advocate there, that yes, this money's out there, but is it the right thing and the right time for you to go for that? So we're going to be having some breakout conversations through our event, but ultimately, if you're watching this back, have a good think, really, and think, when you've written bids before, what has worked well, what have been the bids that got through, what have been the bids that haven't, or talk to other people about that, and think about what could improve it, or ask people if they'll share examples of their bids with you so that you can pick up on that. And there's no foolproof method to doing this, and every fund is different, and every staff member in an organisation is different. So it's a difficult thing to navigate, but the more that you use some of these tips, hopefully that we've put in here, and add some of your own tips and magic sparkle on that, then all the better. I was just going to let you know, as we wrap up, there are more events that we've got coming up. We are running a series of these webinars. We've got webinars coming up on adapting your sort of social business model. We've got webinars on funds, or rather financial management and cash flow forecasting and new scenario planning for the future. We've got PR and media and attracting attention sessions. So whether you get to them by checking our Eventbrite, or whether you look at the listen again options that we're putting on YouTube now, we just hope that this helps in thinking through what you're doing and building your resilience and your plans for the future. The one other thing, or two other things, I was just going to say, we've got our calendar here that you can go and have a look at of some of the events we've got coming up. But we've also got these podcasts. So working with Vic Turnbull at Mike Media, we've got all sorts of anecdotes, stories, hints, tips and insights from a wide range of women change makers. I think we're on episode 9 now. So these are free to use. If you just look up Supporting Women in Social Enterprise podcast online, or through any podcasting platform you might already use, you should be able to get your hands on these and have a listen in on themes that could complement what you're thinking or what you're needing to learn right now. So best of luck with it. I hope that's been useful, and by all means email us, share your thoughts about what we've been doing on Twitter, and we'll be looking out to see how people do over the coming months with their bids and resilience building. Thanks for listening.